2 weeks ago, my wife went to visit our daughter and son-in-law, and I decided to surprise them and go too. When I approached the door of their house, a neighbor shouted, "Wait, I have something to tell you." 5 minutes later, the police arrived, and the consequences turned everything upside down. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel, and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. The highway stretched ahead like a sentence I couldn't finish. I-4 had never felt this long before, though I'd driven it dozens of times over the years. My hands gripped the steering wheel harder than necessary, knuckles pale against the black leather. The phone sat in the cup holder, screen dark, mocking me with its silence. 3 days. Vivian never went 3 days without returning a call. I glanced at the phone again, knowing I'd see nothing new but checking anyway. Same unanswered texts. Same voicemails delivered into the void. The last one I'd left that morning sounded desperate even to my own ears. "Viv, I'm worried. Just let me know you're okay. Call me back, please." The surprise visit had seemed like a good idea yesterday. Drive to Orlando, show up with flowers, take Vivian and Della out for lunch somewhere nice, make a day of it. But somewhere around mile marker 68, the surprise started feeling less like a gift and more like an emergency response. Exit signs counted down the distance. 40 miles to Orlando, 35, 30. My mind kept circling back to the months before Vivian left for this visit. Della's phone calls had changed, not in frequency. She'd always been good about checking in, but in content. Every conversation eventually steered toward money. The roof needed repairs. Curtis's contracting work had slowed down. Could we help with the mortgage this month? And then more recently, questions that left a sour taste. "Dad, have you and Mom thought about updating your will? You know, with property values changing and everything." I'd mentioned it to Vivian after that particular call. She was folding laundry in our bedroom, her movements unhurried and precise. "She's our daughter, Otis," she'd said without looking up. "She's just going through a rough patch. We went through rough patches too, remember?" I remembered. But something about Della's tone felt different. Calculated, maybe. Or maybe I was just getting paranoid in my old age, seeing shadows where there was only ordinary family struggle. The exit for Orlando appeared. I merged right, following the ramp into suburban sprawl. Strip malls and chain restaurants gave way to residential streets, lined with identical two-story homes. Della's neighborhood looked the same as always. Tidy lawns, basketball hoops in driveways, minivans parked at careful angles. Her house stood at the end of a cul-de-sac. The lawn had been mowed recently, leaving perfect parallel stripes in the grass. No newspapers cluttered the driveway. Nothing seemed disturbed or wrong. I pulled up to the curb and killed the engine. For a moment, I just sat there. Maybe I'd overreacted. Maybe Vivian had dropped her phone in Della's pool, or left it in a restaurant, or simply gotten caught up in mother-daughter time and forgotten to charge it. Simple explanations existed. They had to. I got out and walked to the front door. The concrete path felt solid under my shoes. Normal. I reached for the doorbell and pressed it, hearing the chime echo inside the house. Waited, counted to 30, pressed it again. Nothing. I tried the door handle. Locked. Cupped my hands against the front window and peered through the glass. The living room looked empty. Furniture arranged exactly as I remembered from our last visit at Christmas. No lights on, no movement. I pulled out my phone and dialed Della's number. It rang 4 times, then dropped to voicemail. Her cheerful recorded voice. "Hey, this is Della. Can't get to the phone right now, but leave a message and I'll call you back super soon." I didn't leave a message. Instead, I tried Curtis. Same result. Straight to voicemail after several rings. His message was shorter, more businesslike. "Curtis Richards, leave your name and number." The unease that had been building since Tampa crystallized into something sharper. Where were they? Della knew I might visit. I'd mentioned it vaguely during our last conversation. She always answered her phone. Always. "Excuse me. Wait!" I turned. A man was hurrying across the lawn from the house next door, moving with purpose. Mid-40s, thinning hair, dressed in a polo shirt and khakis. His expression carried urgency that didn't match the quiet suburban afternoon. "Are you family?" he called out, slightly breathless. "Are you Vivian's husband?" The question stopped me cold. How did this stranger know Vivian's name? He reached me and extended his hand, though the gesture seemed automatic. something he did while his mind worked on more important matters. I'm Robert Delaney. I live next door. He pointed at the house he'd emerged from. Listen, I need to tell you something. About a week ago, something happened here. He glanced back at Della's house, then at me, his jaw working as he chose his words. There were screams, he said finally, late at night. A woman's voice? My chest tightened. Robert didn't wait for me to ask questions. The words came out in a rush, like he'd been holding them in too long. It was around midnight, maybe a little after. A week ago, June 8th, I remember because it was the night before my daughter's birthday. I heard screaming from this house. He gestured at Della's front windows. Not just yelling, screaming, a woman begging someone to call an ambulance, saying she needed help. I felt the ground shift beneath my feet, subtle but unmistakable. I got up, went to my front window, Robert continued. Della and Curtis came outside, right there on the lawn. They were yelling back at the house, saying everything was fine, just a nightmare, no emergency, but that screaming, he shook his head. That wasn't a nightmare. I've heard nightmares wake people up. This was terror. What did you do? The question came out hoarse. I called emergency services anyway, told them someone needed help at this address. Della and Curtis saw me on my phone through the window and started waving at me to stop, but I'd already made the call. He crossed his arms, defensive now, as if he expected me to criticize the decision. The paramedics arrived maybe 10 minutes later. They went inside with Della and Curtis. When they came back out, they had a woman on a stretcher. She could barely lift her head. It was Vivian. The world narrowed to Robert's face, his mouth forming words that couldn't possibly be real. She was barely conscious, he said. The paramedics were moving fast, checking her vitals, asking Della questions. Your daughter and her husband just stood there watching, didn't get in the ambulance, didn't even follow it to the hospital. They went back inside, and the next morning, both their cars were gone. Haven't seen them since. My hands were shaking. I looked down at them, surprised by the tremor, then back at Robert. Which hospital? I don't know. I assumed, he faltered. I assumed family would handle it, that someone would contact you. I pulled out my phone, dialed Della again. Voicemail. Curtis. Voicemail. Then I called emergency services, forcing my voice steady as I identified myself, and asked about ambulance calls to this address 1 week ago. The dispatcher put me on hold. Muzak played, incongruously cheerful. Robert stood watching me, his concern etched deeper now that he'd said everything out loud. Emergency services, how can I help you? I'm calling about an ambulance dispatch to 847 Meadowbrook Lane on June 8th, I said. The patient was my wife, Vivian Morgan. I need to know which hospital she was taken to. Keys clicked on the other end. Orlando Regional Medical Center, sir. The call came in at 12:43 a.m. Thank you. I hung up and immediately dialed the hospital. 3 transfers, 3 different voices asking me to hold. Finally, a nurse in the ICU with a tired, professional tone. Vivian Morgan, yes. She was admitted June 8th. Serious condition, but stable as of yesterday. What happened to her? I can't provide details over the phone, sir. You'll need to come in person. Are you family? I'm her husband. A pause. 4th floor, ICU. Ask for the charge nurse when you arrive. I lowered the phone. Robert was watching me, waiting. I'm calling the police, I told him. This isn't right. He nodded immediately. I'll give a statement. Whatever you need. I dialed Orlando Police Department, reported a possible crime, gave them the address, explained what Robert had witnessed. The officer on the line told me someone would meet me at the hospital. I was already moving toward my car. The hospital's on Colonial, Robert called after me. Orlando Regional Medical Center. Take Highway 50 East. I'll find it. I got in, started the engine, pulled away from the curb without looking back. The drive felt surreal. Traffic lights changed colors. People crossed streets with shopping bags and coffee cups, going about ordinary Tuesdays while my entire world cracked open. What happened to Vivian? Why wouldn't Della call an ambulance for her own mother? Why did they run? Questions multiplied faster than my speedometer climbed. Orlando Regional Medical Center rose against the skyline, all glass and concrete angles. I parked in the visitor lot, took the elevator to the 4th floor, followed signs to the ICU. A woman in plainclothes was waiting near the nurse's station, detective's badge clipped to her belt. Mr. Morgan? She extended her hand. Detective Lisa Thornton, Orlando PD. I got the call about your wife's situation. Where is she? Room 412. But I need to ask you some questions first. When did you last speak with Vivian? 2 weeks ago when she left to visit our daughter. We texted a few times after that. Then 3 days ago, she stopped responding. Thornton wrote in a small notebook. And you didn't know she was hospitalized? Nobody contacted me. I came here because I was worried. A neighbor told me what happened. Her expression shifted, a professional mask slipping just enough to show something darker underneath. Your wife suffered severe poisoning, Mr. Morgan. Combination of sedatives and cardiac medication. The dose was potentially lethal. She's been unconscious for most of the week. We've been trying to locate next of kin. The words landed like physical blows. My daughter and son-in-law were with her, I said slowly. The neighbor heard her screaming for help. They told him it was nothing. Then they disappeared. Does that sound like an accident to you, Detective? Thornton's jaw tightened. Room 412. Go see your wife. I'll be here when you're ready to talk. The ICU room was dim, curtains half drawn. Machines beeped steadily, monitoring vitals with mechanical precision. Vivian lay in the bed, tubes and wires connecting her to equipment I didn't want to understand. Her face looked smaller than I remembered, skin pale against white pillows. I pulled a chair close and took her hand. It felt fragile, like bird bones. I'm here now, I said quietly. The words were for her, even if she couldn't hear them. When you wake up, you'll tell me what they did. And I promise you... My voice dropped lower, harder. I'll make sure they answer for every second of this. Something shifted inside me then. The shocked father evaporated. In his place, the prosecutor I'd been for 30 years. The man who built cases brick by brick, who found patterns in chaos, who knew exactly how to make people accountable for their actions. Della and Curtis had made a mistake. They'd left evidence. They'd left witnesses. They'd left their victim alive. And they'd underestimated me. I didn't leave the chair beside her bed. The nurses offered alternatives. A cot in the waiting room, a nearby hotel with a discount for families. But I refused. My hand stayed wrapped around Vivian's, feeling for any change, any sign she was coming back. Somewhere around 5 a.m, her fingers twitched against my palm. I straightened, leaned closer. Her eyelids fluttered, struggling against whatever darkness held her. A nurse noticed, moved quickly to the monitors, checked readings, pressed a call button. Within minutes, a doctor arrived, penlight in hand, examining Vivian's responses with clinical efficiency. Her eyes opened, unfocused at first, pupils adjusting to the dim light. Then they found my face and held there. Otis? The word came out rough, barely recognizable through the damage a ventilator tube leaves behind. Where? The nurse brought water, held the cup while Vivian took small sips. Her throat worked painfully, but gradually, sound returned. How long have I been here? A week? The words felt inadequate. You've been here a week? Her eyes widened, confusion bleeding into fear. I watched her trying to piece together time she'd lost, reaching for memories that scattered like smoke. The doctor confirmed she was stable enough to talk. Detective Thornton appeared shortly after, recording device in hand. Expression professional, but not unkind. Vivian described what she could remember, voice shaking through the account. Della had made dinner on June 8th. Nothing fancy. Pasta with vegetables, garlic bread. About an hour after eating, something went wrong. Dizziness first, then nausea, then her heart racing so fast she couldn't catch her breath. I asked Della to call an ambulance, Vivian said, staring at her hands. She said no. Said it was just food poisoning, that I'd feel better if I lay down, but it got worse. Everything was spinning, and my chest hurt so much I thought... She stopped, swallowed. I begged her. I said, Della, please, something's wrong with my heart. She just looked at Curtis. And he stood in front of the door. Wouldn't let me leave the room. I sat motionless, absorbing each word like a blow. I screamed for help, Vivian continued. I thought maybe someone outside would hear. Then everything went dark. I remember a voice through the window, someone calling out. But after that, nothing. Just waking up here now. Detective Thornton stopped the recording, gave Vivian a moment before speaking. The toxicology shows levels of zolpidem and digoxin that would kill most people your age, Mrs. Morgan. Someone with medical knowledge would understand exactly what this combination does. This wasn't accidental. What are those? Vivian asked, though her face suggested she didn't really want to know. Sleeping medication and cardiac medication, Thornton said, Neither was prescribed to you. Do you know if Della or Curtis had access to those drugs? Vivian's forehead creased. There were pill bottles in their bathroom. I saw them when I first arrived. Curtis mentioned something about anxiety and trouble sleeping, but I didn't pay much attention. The detective made notes, asked follow-up questions, established timeline details that would matter in court. I listened, building my own mental file of every fact, every inconsistency. I need to conduct interviews, Thornton said eventually. Della Richards and Curtis Richards just returned to their Orlando home. Apparently they took a trip. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. I'm coming with you, I said, already standing. Mr. Morgan, this is official police business. Given your relationship to the victim and the suspects, they're not suspects. They're criminals who tried to murder my wife. Thornton's expression softened slightly, which is exactly why you can't be present during questioning. I understand your frustration, but we need to do this right. Let me handle it. She was correct, and I knew it. Decades in the prosecutor's office taught me the importance of clean investigations, untainted evidence. I sat back down. Hours passed. Vivian drifted in and out of sleep, exhausted by the effort of consciousness. I held her hand, watched machines track her vital signs, tried not to imagine Curtis standing between her and the door while she begged for help. Detective Thornton returned late afternoon. Her expression told me everything before she spoke. They admit Vivian was sick that night, she said, pulling up a chair. But their story is that she took the pills herself, said she couldn't sleep, was stressed about family finances. They claim they were about to call an ambulance when the neighbor, quote, interfered. They left for the Bahamas the next day because the trip was pre-planned, and they didn't realize how serious the situation was since the hospital said Vivian was stable. That's a lie, Vivian's voice stronger now but trembling with anger. I believe you, Thornton said, but their story is coordinated, rehearsed. A defense attorney could argue the poisoning caused confusion, affected your memory of events. Right now, it's your word against theirs. We need more. After she left, I sat in silence. 30 years in the prosecutor's office had prepared me for this moment, though I'd never imagined applying that knowledge to my own family. Investigation takes months. Evidence is circumstantial. Even if charges are filed, conviction isn't guaranteed. And meanwhile, Della and Curtis would walk free, acting innocent, telling their version to anyone who'd listen. I looked at Vivian, frail and traumatized in the hospital bed. Then I pulled out my phone and scrolled through contacts until I found a name I hadn't called in years. Marcus Webb, private investigator who'd worked dozens of cases with me during my prosecutor days, digging up financial records and hidden connections that turned circumstantial cases into convictions. I pressed dial. Marcus, it's Otis Morgan. I need your help with something. It's personal. The coffee shop in Tampa was nearly empty on Thursday morning. Marcus Webb sat across from me, 3 file folders spread between our cups, his expression grim as he walked me through what he'd found in just 2 days. Your daughter made 47 calls to creditors in the past 3 months, he said, sliding the first folder forward. Collection agencies, credit card companies, mortgage servicers. Every account is past due, most by 60 days or more. I opened the folder. Phone records, bank statements, credit reports, all the financial debris of a life falling apart. Curtis owed money everywhere. Online gambling sites, sports betting, poker rooms in Orlando and Miami. The numbers kept climbing. $85,000 in credit card debt, Marcus continued. Another $120,000 in gambling losses across various platforms. Their mortgage is 2 months overdue. Foreclosure proceedings started last week. And Della knew all this? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. She called your estate attorney 4 weeks before the poisoning, June 10th. Asked about probate timelines. What happens when someone dies intestate versus with a will? Whether adult children automatically inherit. The attorney thought she was just curious about family planning. Marcus paused. That's not curiosity, Otis. That's planning. I closed the folder, the pieces falling into a pattern I recognized from dozens of prosecutions. Financial desperation plus opportunity equals motive. But knowing it and proving it in court were different challenges. From the coffee shop, I drove to James Walker's office downtown. Walker had been my go-to for complex cases requiring civil litigation expertise, the kind of attorney who understood how to apply pressure from multiple angles. His office overlooked Tampa Bay, floor-to-ceiling windows framing sailboats drifting across blue water. Walker sat behind his desk, reading Marcus's report with the focused intensity that made him successful. "Criminal court requires proof beyond reasonable doubt," he said finally. "The DA might struggle with that, given the coordinated alibi and Vivian's memory gaps. But civil court, preponderance of evidence, 51%. We can prove this on civil grounds even if criminal charges fail, and we can make their lives very uncomfortable in the process." "What are you suggesting?" "Wrongful injury lawsuit, emotional distress, medical expenses. We freeze their assets during discovery, force them to answer questions under oath, expose every financial motive to the criminal investigators. Civil litigation can be a powerful weapon when used strategically." He leaned back, fingers steepled. "And I assume you want this done aggressively." "I want it done correctly," I said. "But yes, aggressively." Walker smiled. Not warmth, but recognition of shared purpose. "I'll have papers drawn up by end of day." My next stop was the estate attorney's office, a smaller practice near Hyde Park. Gerald Simmons had handled our wills 5 years ago, straightforward documents that left everything to each other, then to Della after we both passed. "I need changes," I told him after explaining the situation. "Remove Della completely. Everything goes to Vivian, then to Charity if she predeceases me. And add language that if Della contests this will, she forfeits any claim whatsoever." Gerald's pen moved across legal pad, taking notes. "You want a no-contest clause. Standard practice when there's concern about challenges. I can have a revised will, ready for signature tomorrow." "Today," I said. "I'll wait." He nodded, understanding the urgency without needing explanation. Back home that evening, Vivian sat in our living room, discharged from the hospital earlier that day. She looked smaller than I remembered, wrapped in a blanket despite Tampa's heat. I'd shown her Marcus's report over dinner, or tried to. She'd put the folder down after 3 pages. She called about the will a month before this happened? Her voice was hollow, processing facts that contradicted everything she'd believed about our daughter. "She actually planned it?" "The evidence suggests so." "I kept telling you she was just going through a rough time, that she'd never—" Vivian's hands trembled slightly. "I was so wrong." I sat beside her, careful not to touch her without permission. Hospital experiences leave invisible boundaries. "You weren't wrong to love your daughter. She was wrong to betray that love." We sat in silence for several minutes. Then Vivian straightened, something hardening in her expression. "What's the next step?" I explained Walker's strategy, the civil lawsuit, the asset freeze, the discovery process that would expose everything. Vivian listened without interruption, then nodded once. "Do it." Friday morning, I called Della's number. She answered on the second ring, voice carefully bright. "Dad, how's Mom doing? I've been so worried." "Your mother needs family right now," I interrupted, keeping my tone neutral. "I think we should talk, all of us together, face to face. Can you and Curtis come to Tampa this weekend? We need to work through what happened." A pause. I could almost hear her calculating, deciding how to play this. "Of course," she said finally. "We want to help however we can. Saturday work?" "Saturday's perfect. Come around noon." After I hung up, I signed the authorization form for Walker's lawsuit. Monday morning, Della and Curtis would be served with papers. But first, I wanted to see their faces when they thought they'd gotten away with it. The pen felt heavy in my hand as I wrote my name. Not regret, just recognition of the moment when everything would change. The civil complaint sat on my desk. 38 pages of allegations that read like an indictment, which in a sense, it was. James Walker had done excellent work, every charge supported by medical records, every dollar of damages calculated precisely. $2 million in compensatory and punitive damages for attempted murder, intentional infliction of emotional distress, medical expenses approaching $200,000. Walker's voice came through the speakerphone. "We file within the hour. Once the process server delivers this to their door, there's no walking it back. You certain about this?" "File it," I said. "Understood. I'll call you after service is complete." I hung up and pictured the scene. Process server approaching Della's house, knocking on the door, handing over the thick manila envelope. Her opening it, scanning the first page, seeing the words attempted murder and 2,000 in bold type. The satisfaction I felt was cold, methodical. This was step one. The call came 3 hours later, not from Walker, but from Della. I let it ring twice before answering, keeping my voice level. Yes? $2 million? Her scream came through sharp enough to hurt. Dad, have you lost your mind? This is insane. It was an accident. Mom took those pills herself because she couldn't sleep. You're ruining our lives over a misunderstanding. The same rehearsed explanation she'd given the detective. I let her continue, listening for inconsistencies, cataloging every claim. We were trying to help her. She was stressed about money, about the house, and she took too many pills. We were about to call for help when that nosy neighbor interfered. Now you're suing us. Your own daughter? She paused for breath. I spoke into the silence. You had a choice that night, Della. When your mother was screaming for help, begging you to call an ambulance, you made a choice. You chose to let her suffer. Now you'll answer for that choice in court. Her tone shifted instantly from hysteria to fury. You're destroying my life over nothing. We're your family. Family doesn't let family die for inheritance money. I ended the call. 20 minutes passed before my phone rang again. Curtis this time. I answered without greeting. His voice came out careful, modulated, the tone of someone trying to negotiate a business deal. Otis, listen. I know this looks bad, but we can work this out, right? Family should handle things privately. What if there's a way to make this go away? We could agree to certain terms, maybe some financial arrangement. I walked to the window, looked out at Tampa's downtown skyline while Curtis's desperate pitch continued. When he finally stopped, I responded. You're offering me money? With what? The $85,000 you owe on credit cards? The $120,000 in gambling debts? Or were you planning to use the inheritance you thought you'd get when Vivian died? Silence. Then, in a voice stripped of its careful tone, what are you talking about? I didn't answer the question. There's no deal, Curtis. See you in court. Another hang-up. Detective Thornton called that afternoon. We executed the search warrant this morning. Found some interesting items.